The silence hit harder than I expected. My name is Julian. I'm 51 years old, and I live in Atlanta, Georgia. For 20 years, I've been the principal of a large public high school, not the kind of job that lends itself to quiet. But the day Luke left for military academy, our house went from noisy to hollow in the space of a single morning. Luke's goodbye was quick, practical. That's how he is. A firm hug, a half smile, a don't let mom redecorate my room, and then he was gone. Just like that. The quiet that followed didn't feel like peace. It felt like a vacuum. I kept finding myself standing still in the middle of rooms, not sure what I'd come in for. I told myself it was just the adjustment, that I needed time to recalibrate without the daily chaos of a teenage boy. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just Luke's absence that had unsettled me. Vanessa was still here, but she felt a million miles away. My wife had always been driven. Her design firm had taken off over the past few years, and she was proud of that. I was too. But after Luke left, I started noticing the little ways she was withdrawing. She stopped lingering in the kitchen in the mornings. She stopped asking how my day went. Her conversations grew shorter, tighter. Her phone seemed to buzz constantly, but the laughs that followed weren't shared with me anymore. It wasn't dramatic, just subtle. A shift in temperature. I tried to distract myself with projects. I took up jogging again, cleaned the garage, spent hours organizing my office at school. But none of it filled the ache in my chest that grew a little heavier every time I came home to the sound of nothing. One night, I was cleaning out Luke's old bookshelf, mostly sports magazines and dusty trophies, when I noticed an envelope wedged between the shelves. It wasn't his. The paper was thick, expensive. I opened it out of reflex. Inside was a receipt from a high-end men's boutique in Buckhead. Custom tailoring, it said. And in the corner, just under the logo, a handwritten note in Vanessa's handwriting. To H, always, V. At first, I stared at it like it was in a foreign language. H. My first name is Julian. I flipped the receipt over, hoping for context. There was none. Just a crisp, clinical breakdown of a bespoke blazer, one I'd never seen. One that definitely wasn't for me. I sat on the edge of Luke's bed, the envelope still in my hand, and felt a cold weight settle in my chest. There were no shouting matches. No dramatic tears. Just a quiet crack, right down the center of the life I thought we were living. I put the envelope back where I found it, then pulled it out again 30 minutes later. I knew what it meant, but I couldn't admit it. Not yet. Instead, I folded it neatly and tucked it between the pages of an old poetry book that Vanessa had once bought me, back when we used to exchange gifts just because. That night, I lay in bed beside her, both of us facing away from each other. And for the first time in our marriage, I felt like a guest in my own life. I didn't confront her. I thought about it, sure. 100 times a day. Every time I saw her glance at her phone and smile. Every time she told me she had another late client meeting. Every time her perfume lingered longer than it used to when she walked out the door. But I said nothing. Instead, I watched. Vanessa had always cared about her appearance. It was part of her job. But now there was a new edge to it. A sharper heel, a tighter dress, lipstick shades she hadn't worn in years. She started coming home later, claiming meetings ran long, that traffic had been bad. She smelled like places she never named. A bar, maybe. Some hotel lobby. Once, I leaned in to kiss her cheek and caught a scent I didn't recognize. Earthy, musky, distinctly male. I didn't ask. I didn't want the answer. We moved around the house like ghosts, polite, coordinated, and completely detached. In the mornings, we exchanged the same stale greetings. Morning, she'd say, not looking up from her phone. Morning, I'd reply, pouring my coffee. We had mastered the choreography of a couple still sharing space, but not a life. She'd ask if I needed anything from the grocery store. I'd tell her the dog needed food. She'd nod. I'd nod. The air between us was filled with silence too thick to breathe through. Nights were the worst. I'd lie awake listening to her breathe evenly beside me, wondering if she was asleep or pretending. Sometimes I thought about turning to her and just saying it. I know. But the words always stuck somewhere behind my teeth. I wasn't ready to hear what she might say back. Then came the weekend. Friday evening, I came home from work and found her suitcase near the front door. She didn't see me at first. She was typing something on her phone, fast, focused. Going somewhere? I asked, setting down my bag. She looked up, startled. Out of town. Client meeting in Charleston. Last minute. I nodded like it made sense. You'll be back Sunday? Monday. Maybe Tuesday. Depends on how things go. I just stood there. I wanted to scream, to ask her if H was in Charleston, to beg her to just tell me the truth so I could stop drowning in it. But instead, I said, safe drive. Thanks, she replied, lifting her suitcase. Don't wait up. I didn't. I stood in the driveway and watched her taillights disappear down the street. I didn't wave. I didn't call after her. I just watched until the car turned the corner and the house fell quiet again. That night, I slept on the couch, not because I had to, because it felt like the only honest place left. I didn't leave in a storm. I left in silence. It started with a job posting in academic consulting position in northern Maine. A friend of mine from grad school had sent it over with a quick message. Thought of you. Quiet town. Good people. I read the email twice before forwarding it to my personal account. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts louder than the ticking clock. The next morning, I applied. I didn't tell Vanessa right away. There wasn't a point. The job felt hypothetical, something I could cling to when the house felt too quiet, when her perfume clung to the furniture long after she was gone. But then, 2 weeks later, I got the call. They wanted to fly me up for an interview. I said yes without hesitation. Maine in early spring was cold, gray, and breathtaking. The air smelled different, cleaner. The town was small, the kind of place where people waved at you from their porches and the barista remembered your name after one coffee. I sat in the school's front office, listening to the headmaster explain the role. I barely heard him. I had already made up my mind. I returned to Atlanta with a decision sealed in my chest. That weekend, I told her. We were in the kitchen, both pretending to care about the headlines scrolling across the TV. I poured her a coffee and slid it across the counter. I took a job, I said. In Maine. She blinked, her spoon pausing mid-stir. Maine. Academic consulting. It's remote mostly. I'll be moving up next month. She didn't ask why. She didn't cry. She didn't beg me to stay. Instead, she sipped her coffee, set it down, and said, that makes sense. Just like that. We didn't have a dramatic argument. We didn't accuse or confess. We agreed on what furniture I'd take, what accounts I'd leave untouched. She said I could keep the house keys as long as I needed, and I nodded like that mattered. In the end, I only packed what I needed. My books. A few suits. The framed photo of Luke holding his first fishing rod. The rest stayed, our wedding china, our anniversary gifts, the framed vacation pictures that now felt like lies printed on glossy paper. On my last night in the house, I went into Luke's room one more time. The receipt was still there, pressed into the poetry book. I took it with me. Not out of bitterness, but because it marked the moment everything changed. I didn't want to forget that moment. I wanted to remember what it cost to stay silent. I drove out before dawn. The sky was still dark when I crossed the state line, but for the first time in months, my lungs felt full. Not with happiness, maybe, but with something close to peace. A few weeks into my new life, a box showed up at my door. I had just come back from the local grocer, still getting used to the pace of this place, where checkout clerks ask about your weekend and mean it, when I saw it on the porch. Brown cardboard, taped at the edges, no return label. Vanessa's handwriting was scrawled across the top. I carried it inside, set it on the kitchen table, and stared at it for a long time. It wasn't heavy. Probably books, I guessed. Maybe some old junk she didn't want to keep around. Still, something in my gut turned. I opened it carefully, like I was disarming a bomb. Inside, it was exactly what I expected, a pile of what she deemed mine. A few of my old cookbooks, some office supplies, leftover decor samples I'd once helped her sort through on a rainy Sunday. At the bottom, a framed photo of Luke and me from his middle school baseball game. He's smiling, squinting into the sun, his glove still tucked under one arm. I set that one aside. Then I saw the garment box. It was white, crisp, branded with the logo from that same boutique on the receipt. My breath caught. I opened it slowly, like peeling a scab you forgot was still healing. There it was. The blazer. Dark navy, perfectly folded, tissue paper still tucked at the corners. Monogrammed inside. HM, it was just like the receipt had described, hand-stitched, clean lines, more expensive than anything I'd ever buy for myself. Beneath it sat a pair of cufflinks, engraved with the same initials. A silver tie clip. And under all of it, a photo. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't buried. Just placed neatly at the bottom of the box like an afterthought. Vanessa. Mid-laugh. Her arms around a man I didn't recognize. He was older than me, broader in the shoulders. His hands rested at her waist like they belonged there. I didn't feel rage. I didn't even feel grief. I just felt done. Whatever part of me still wondered if I'd imagined it, if maybe I'd misunderstood the signs, went quiet. This was the confirmation I hadn't asked for, but somehow needed. I didn't break anything. I didn't call her. I didn't even cry. I took the photo and the cufflinks and placed them back in the box, sealed it, and shoved it into the back of the guest room closet. But the blazer, I kept that. I didn't know why exactly. Maybe because it had become something else now. Not a symbol of betrayal, but of survival. A quiet reminder that I had lived through the slow unraveling of a marriage and come out the other side still standing. I hung it in my closet, next to the few dress shirts I'd brought to Maine. I ran my hand down the sleeve once, then shut the door. And just like that, the past stayed boxed up, where it belonged. Luke called every Sunday like clockwork. Sometimes it was short, just a quick check-in between drills and study blocks, but it was enough. His voice had changed since he left. Deeper. Steadier. Still him, but older somehow, like the time away had carved new edges into the boy I used to wake up for soccer practice every Saturday morning. We didn't talk about Vanessa much. He didn't ask, and I didn't offer. But now, and then he'd mention something, how she sent him a care package, or how her texts were getting more weirdly formal, as he put it. I just listened. Then one Sunday, he called out of the blue in the middle of the week. It was late. The main wind rattled the windows, and I had just made tea. I picked up on the second ring. Hey, Dad, he said. Got a minute? Always. There was a pause, long enough for me to sit down. Then he said, I'm getting married. It took me a second. I blinked into the dark kitchen, stunned silent. You're, what? I proposed. She said yes. He laughed, nervous and proud at the same time. Her name's Kara. She's in my unit. Smart, tough. You'd like her. My chest tightened in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. Wow. Congratulations, Luke. I'm proud of you. Thanks, he said, voice softer now. I want you there, of course. It's gonna be small. Nothing fancy. Ceremony on base. Wouldn't miss it. Another pause. There's something else, he said, voice changing again. Something weird. I waited. Mom suggested I ask Harold to walk me down the path. Harold. The name dropped like a stone in my gut. She said it would be symbolic, Luke added, his tone tight. You know, since she says he's always been a mentor to me. Which is crap. I stayed quiet. Luke wasn't done. I told her no. I told her absolutely not. That you're the one doing it. That this is something only my dad is gonna do. My throat burned. Look, I managed, but the words stuck. I didn't know how to say what I wanted to say without breaking down. I mean it, he said. You've always been there. Through everything. I don't care what Mom thinks is symbolic. I know who raised me. The silence on the line stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was full. Heavy in the best way. When we finally hung up, I didn't move right away. I just sat there, the cold tea forgotten, staring into the dark, overwhelmed by the warmth his words had left behind. It was the first time in a long time I felt something break inside me in a good way, not a fracture, but a release. Vanessa had tried to rewrite the story, but Luke remembered the truth. And that was enough. The morning of the wedding, I stood in front of the closet and opened the door. There it was, still hanging neatly, untouched since the day I'd unpacked it, the blazer. The one that had once made my heart sink, the one engraved for someone else. Clear as day inside the collar. I reached out and ran my hand down the sleeve, like I'd done so many times before. This time felt different. I didn't wear it to forgive. I wore it because I'd survived it. It fit perfectly, almost unsettlingly so. But as I looked at myself in the mirror, something in me settled. This was no longer Vanessa's secret. This was mine now, reclaimed, repurposed. An emblem of quiet strength, not betrayal. The ceremony was held at a small outdoor chapel on base, modest, clean, rows of folding chairs, and a modest white trellis decorated with hand-tied flowers. Luke stood near the front in full uniform, jaw tight, posture straighter than I'd ever seen. When he spotted me, his face cracked into the kind of grin that didn't need words. He walked up and wrapped me in a hug tight, warm, brief. No one said anything. No one needed to. I looked at him then, really looked at him, and I saw the man he had become. Proud, steady, whole. That moment, that hug, it said everything the last few years hadn't. Vanessa stood on the other side of the crowd. She looked good. She always did. Her dress was elegant, her hair swept back in a careful, practiced bun. But her eyes, they shifted when she saw what I was wearing. Her gaze landed on the blazer, on the sleeves. Her lips parted, just barely. She knew. I didn't flinch. I didn't smile. I didn't give her anything. I turned back to Luke. When the music started, he reached for my arm. I walked him down that ceremonial path like it was the most natural thing in the world. And maybe it was. Maybe it had always been meant to be this way. The wind was soft that day, just enough to rustle the trees, enough to remind you that the world was still moving, no matter what had come before. We reached the altar, and I stepped back, giving him a quiet nod. His future stood in front of him now, and mine was finally untethered from the past. As the vows began, I took my seat in the second row, and for the first time in a long time, I felt light. Not happy, not triumphant, just free. The blazer hugged my shoulders like a quiet echo. I had worn the wound. Now I wore the healing. The ceremony faded into applause and cheers, and soon the garden filled with the low hum of conversation, clinking glasses, and soft music drifting from a rented speaker. I stayed near the edge of it all. Luke was glowing, shaking hands, laughing with old friends from the academy. Kara clung to his arm, her smile just as wide, radiant in a way that made me understand exactly why he'd chosen her. They looked like the future. And for once, I didn't feel like a man left behind. I held a glass of water, more as a prop than anything, and made my way to a quiet bench tucked behind a few rows of trimmed hedges. It was shaded, peaceful, and far enough from the crowd that I could breathe without needing to perform. I sat back and loosened the blazer sleeve, adjusting the cuff. That's when I saw her. Vanessa stood on the opposite side of the lawn, holding a flute of champagne. Alone. She wasn't talking to anyone, just watching. Her heels sank slightly into the grass as she took a small step forward, then paused. Her eyes were on me. Or more precisely, on the sleeve I had just adjusted, the embroidered edge, the monogram. HM. Our eyes met. I didn't smile. Neither did she. Her lips tightened. Her gaze lingered, and for a second, something flickered behind it. Recognition? Guilt? Regret? I wasn't sure. And it didn't matter. She didn't approach. She turned and disappeared back into the blur of guests, swallowed up by the small talk and polite laughter. That was the last time I saw her that day. Later, as the sun dipped low and shadows stretched across the grass, I stayed in my seat and watched the world slow down. Most of the guests had trickled into the reception tent, leaving behind scattered rose petals and abandoned programs. I sat alone, looking up at the stars beginning to peek through the sky, the fabric of night slowly stitching itself overhead. I ran my fingers down the sleeve of the blazer, once a message meant for someone else, now a quiet reminder of who I had become. I didn't win an argument. I didn't make a scene. I didn't need to. I had walked my son down the aisle, heard him say, "Only my dad will do this." I had shown up in the very thing that once made my heart break, and turned it into armor. Some people think victory is loud, but I've learned the quiet kind stays with you longer. And in that garden, with nothing but the wind for company, I smiled for the first time all day. Because in silence, I had finally said everything I ever needed to say.